Hi, and welcome to another edition of Around the Coin. My name is Faisal Khan. I'm your co-host for today. I have with me Kathleen Breitman, who is one of the co-founders of Tezos, one of the new ICOs that is coming out. She took some time out from her busy schedule so we could have a little chat and understand what Tezos is all about. So, Kathleen, how are you?
I'm very well, and yourself?
Not too bad. So, for those who don't know, you are one of the co-founders of Tezos, is that correct? Is that how we pronounce it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a made-up word, so really any way you pronounce it is quite fine, but my husband and I pronounce it Tezos.
Tezos. So tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, and how did you get into the space of, launching a coin or, cryptocurrency, whatever the nomenclature may be. So maybe a little bit of background on you and your husband?
Sure. Yeah, so the joke internally is that my husband is the brains and I'm the brawn. I'm the CEO of the company that's producing the Tezos blockchain, and he's the CTO. And so really it's his vision. He's the architect. My background is more in the business side of things. I've worked in finance and consulting most of my career. So I take care of all the operational aspects of the Tezos blockchain, and I deal with business partnerships. I deal with attorneys. I deal with our marketing group. It's all the non-technical things. By way of background, I studied analytical philosophy in undergrad, which is very useless. Unfortunately, all the philosophy factories were closed by the time I graduated, and so I had to find a job elsewhere. I worked for a year out of a venture capital group. I worked at a hedge fund, and I worked at Accenture for 2 years before going to R3, which many people who follow the space will know. They just raised a $100 million part of their Series A round, so they've been in the press recently. But they started a consortium of 40-plus banks to use blockchain technology, and I was a strategy associate there.
And this was the first consortium that came out basically after the regular blockchain, if you will, correct?
Yeah. It's I think it was the first, the original blockchain consortium, if you will, before Hyperledger and all these guys took off.
What is Tezos? Why did you even come up with this idea? Aren't there enough blockchains out there? And whose brainchild was it?
I think it's mostly my husband's the architect, right? So he's really the one who got into the weeds and really helped out build a vision and see it through. My husband is a really great engineer. Obviously, I'm very biased, but he has a pretty prestigious background. He went to Ecole Polytechnique. He has a degree in financial engineering from NYU. He worked on Wall Street for 10 years in some of the most competitive desks in finance.
He was a hedge fund manager or a trader, I believe.
Yeah, he was a portfolio manager at some point, and yeah, he was a quant. So he was weirdly on the middle between like writing the algorithms and also like creating the economic models for these high frequency trading algorithms. So he was responsible for sort of coming up with and implementing these high frequency trading strategies, which is extraordinarily competitive. But that that's not really how we got into Bitcoin or into this space. We're both actually very philosophically aligned with it. As a complete aside, we're both like crazy crypto anarchists, and so when Bitcoin came out, my husband knew about it through the cryptography mailing list, which is actually run by one of our close friends, Perry Metzger. Pretend internet money, if you will, is kind of like this great cypherpunk pipe dream that was never quite realized in the 1990s, but obviously has a lot of implications if you consider how we make transactions on the web today. There's no native digital asset to the internet. And the cypherpunks very much wanted this for philosophical reasons, which was like to free people from centralized banks and all these terrible things. So we took it with interest when someone said that they had solved the problem. Now, there's a lot of things we like about Bitcoin, and I think there's a certain elegance to it that I would have never come up with. But there was something also very visceral that we had a rather visceral reaction to what we didn't like about Bitcoin. And I think Arthur articulates it well, that it was basically comes down to governance. Blockchains are a commons, so the ledger is shared by everyone, right? Even though the individual tokens are owned by people in full. And so, in economic theory, commons typically fall privy to two issues. There's maintenance of the commons. So the so-called tragedy of the commons is when you can't quite figure out or coordinate on how to maintain the basic measures for how people are going to distribute and service this common property. And there's also the issue of governance, like how do you move forward? How do you coordinate? And the original Bitcoin blockchain really offered no solution for that. And so what Arthur did, essentially, and what Tezos is more or less an abstraction of a blockchain. We separate the blockchain into three layers: the network layer, the transaction layer, and the consensus layer. And we have a very modular design, which allows us to swap in and swap out new versions of the protocol rather seamlessly. So the protocol can upgrade itself and push those upgrades to the network without a lot of hesitation and without a lot of friction.
So if you have a better transaction engine underneath or a faster settlement mechanism, you can just swap it out.
Exactly. And the idea is that people are always going to be working on these things, integrating with them. In most good software packages, like Google Chrome, what I'm using right now to talk to you, you get updates passively, and you don't really think about it too much, and you can add applications on top of them, but underneath all of that, the core protocol is constantly being iterated on. And why shouldn't a blockchain have the same luxury?
So what is Tezos? I mean, it's a blockchain. There are many blockchains out. What specifically does your blockchain do? Is it meant for a specific industry, or is it? You're doing an ICO, which is an initial coin offering. That means you're going to be launching some coins, and you're going to be, and we'll come to that part. But what is the purpose of launching this specific blockchain?
Yeah, that's a good question. So basically, Tezos is a smart contract platform, ultimately. Smart contracts are a way to embed business logic directly into the protocol so that you can move around things and basically program your tokens.
So it's more or less like, for those who don't know, it's like if-then-else kind of statements, right? So when you have logic built into value transfer, that's sort of married into a contract, if a certain condition is met, value is transferred. So if I say, a simple example could be if the price of Oracle stock goes to 80, sell it. So, they look at the genesis of that stock reporting, and if it hits 80, the stock is sold, value is transferred, and the ledgers are adjusted. So that's essentially what a smart contract does in a very nascent sense, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty much it. Unfortunately, the name smart contract causes more problems than it solves because people imagine that there's like this complex legal prose embedded into it. But really, smart contracts can only account for things that we can anticipate. And you're very much embedding this business logic with the goal of doing like one or two very simplistic functions.
And is it also fair to say that the original blockchain can be thought of as, the programming language of BASIC? You could only do so much. And then, R3 and Ripple and Tezos and Ethereum, they're all can be considered as different programming languages, each offering a certain flavor, advantage, focus point, is that a fair assessment?
Oh, yeah, actually, so we wrote our blockchain in OCaml, which is this kind of esoteric in the United States programming language. And the reason that we chose OCaml was because we thought a blockchain is basically a programming language. And OCaml is actually great for writing programming languages. So that was very much part of our philosophy going in, is like, hey, this is a way of like describing how the world works and the state of a certain set of accounts. It's the most concise and accurate and executing way to do this. And that's kind of, from the engineering side, what the directive was.
But coming back to the purpose, what was the epiphany that caused you to go out and develop this blockchain, so to speak?
I think it was more of an obsession with figuring out what could make, kind of solving this intractable problem with Bitcoin. than anything else. And smart contracts, we weren't sure, what their value prop would be when we first started developing our smart contracts language. But I think over time, we're going to come upon and converge on use cases and standards that will kind of present themselves through experimentation.
But did you go with a basic thesis running into the problem? Meaning, your husband could have said, well, here is a stock trading problem, and if I could, somehow build a smart contract for this, that's a use case by itself or something.
I think we were most interested. So 2014, we encountered some people who were thinking about using the technology for capital markets. And my husband and I are biased, right? Because we know more about finance than we do about like healthcare or any other industry, really. So we see a lot of promise in the OTC derivative market for blockchain technology. So a little bit of the programming language was influenced by my husband's background in finance, but more or less, we were just trying to figure out a way to express business logic in a concise manner. So our programming language for Tezos is kind of between Bitcoin script language, which is very low level, and Ethereum's programming language, which is it looks a lot like JavaScript. So arguably, it looks a little bit more intuitive. I think Arthur and Benjamin, who's the developer who's really behind this, they have it based on like Forth and Cat. Which are two kind of old programming languages. And
how many people are in the original founding team at Tezos?
There are 5 people in the original team. Yeah. And
you guys have been at it since when?
I would say it's been in development since like March 2014. Obviously, there's sometimes where it was more in development, sometimes where we couldn't afford to pay the developers, so on and so forth. So it's been kind of a work in progress since then.
I mean, it's all the rage these days. You cannot read any business or any magazine online without coming across the word ICO. What is an ICO? And I mean, let's assume I don't know anything about an ICO. How would you explain it to me?
Yeah, ICO stands for initial coin offering. And basically what it is a way to distribute tokens in a blockchain network. And these tokens.
So is this the same way how Ripple introduced XRP or Bitcoin, which is mined, but you are doing you're not mining, you're just distributing them, right?
Yeah. So we have what's called proof of stake, which is what we're launching with. So actually, we don't have a proof of work mechanism to distribute the tokens. So Bitcoin has 21 million Bitcoin, and the way they're dispersed is through mining activities, which mint new tokens and push them out to the network. Unfortunately, with proof of stake, you don't have that natural, elegant issuance model, and so what we're doing instead is we're selling. The foundation is recommending an allocation of tokens to the Genesis block based on contributions to a Swiss nonprofit. And there's a suggested allocation amount, so 1 Bitcoin for 5,000 Tezos tokens, and we're going to sell them over the course of, or rather have them up for donation for the course of 2 weeks.
So when you say you have them up for donation, is there a specific amount that you will be releasing?
Yeah, so basically what we're going to do is have an open-ended donation period for 2 weeks. And so as many people as, whoever wants to get Tezos tokens will donate Bitcoin to the Swiss Foundation during that time. And that's how we're distributing the tokens, since we have no elegant proof of work system to fall back on. Another issue this presents is that we think most of the tokens that will ever be realized in the Tezos network will come through in this time, and so it's important from us, philosophically, to get Tezos tokens in the hands of as many people who want to participate, just to make the network more decentralized and robust.
And is this Tezos blockchain up and running?
Yeah, so we have an AlphaNet. It has bugs like any other thing that's not in production yet. So we're working on it. We're iterating on it. Some days it's up, some days it's down. We released it to people on a invitational basis in February, and now it's anyone who wants to jump on it can ping us on Slack, and we'll add them to the AlphaNet channel.
And how much are you willing to, or not willing, rather, how much are you aiming to raise? Because I've seen weird numbers out there. I've seen as low as $7 million and as high as $300 million. So that's quite a swing. What do you think you'll get?
I don't really know, to be honest. I think the market has changed a lot since I first embarked upon this. There's really it changes a lot. Like, I would have never guessed that Bancor, which had an ICO yesterday, would have received like $140 million. That was a complete surprise to me. So we aren't an ERC20 token, so we aren't a token on the Ethereum network, which means we don't offer instant liquidity to people who want to trade. So I think that'll deter a lot of people. The lack of cap in our model also deterred a lot of people from it because they don't have, they don't know that if they put in $1 million, they'll get like 10% of the network or whatever. So I think it'll be less egregious than most people are making it out to be. I think that a lot of people are quite negative about us on the internet because we didn't put a cap in. But I think it was
well, everyone has their own flavor, right? So that's your model. I mean, that's your prerogative.
Yeah, I mean, it was very much philosophically in line with like, we want this to be an extremely decentralized token. We think that's how it moves forward for the path to success. And I could have suggested that the foundation engineer its way around into having something very complex and onerous. But I've met people on Wall Street who don't know what a Dutch auction is, and I wasn't. I didn't expect people to figure.
Do you see yourself coming into an agreement that somewhere down the line the token owners currently and the foundation itself then would have a consensus to issue more tokens, and how many? Would that be something that would be considerable?
So one thing we can do with Tezos, which I think is really interesting, is we can have the network like come to consensus on issuing new tokens. And the reason that I think it's valuable is because we can do that to pay people essentially for contributing to the network. So we offer a pecuniary incentive for people to contribute to the Tezos protocol. And we can also use this as an alternative financing structure for the foundation. Though I don't think it's going to come to that, and it does require the consensus of the network. But when we first were looking at this, we had a terrible time getting press, and really no one cared about us. So we thought in our worst case scenario, if the foundation raises $5 million and it really can't even pay like our developer salaries for 4 years, it might want to consider issuing new tokens at some point in the future to finance its activities. It looks less so like that's going to be an issue. Obviously, like, we want to do more capital intensive things with a larger network. And so I'll be pursuing something separate as I'm not affiliated with the foundation. But I think that, it's very unlikely at this point that Tezos will have another token issuance event. But I think it's cool that they can coordinate on chain to do this, and it's not going to be at the behest of a foundation.
And do you have an anchor client, if you will, or an anchor use case or an anchor organization that has decided to work on the Tezos platform?
I've had a lot of people approach me. So after I left R3, I think a lot of people were interested in what I was up to. So I have a lot of inbound traffic from banks, and I don't want to work with banks necessarily at this point because they move much more slowly than I do. Which is, both a bad and a good thing. Point being, I think that a licensing model, through a consultancy or something like that would probably work better for the Tezos Foundation. If they want organizations to use their software and have consulting services. But the fact of the matter is, like, I've been approached by a lot of people, but I also know that it's a massive time suck. And I think our efforts are better used on trying to make the most well executing and efficient blockchain out there, and focusing on our internal expertise, which is the protocol itself, rather than trying to help banks and consultancies figure out how to use our network and understand the protocol at a base level.
Fair point. I think that's the right approach. Once you concentrate on the protocol itself, I think the use cases will automatically present themselves. They'll just mushroom out of nowhere.
It's tempting to do it because that's definitely where my background is and where my biases are, and I know I'd be much happier doing that than
it's also a distraction also, right?
Yeah, ultimately it's I know myself pretty well when it comes to where I lose focus, and doing business development type stuff, while it's fun and interesting for me, it's not the best use of my time right now.
So the $64 million question, you were supposed to launch, do the 2-week period in May, which has now been extended. When can we expect that time frame to come?
That's a very good question indeed. So we're waiting on a Swiss approval through the Swiss nonprofit authorities. And the foundation is run by this guy, Johan Gevers, who is extraordinarily conservative and prudent in his demeanor, which is, part of the reason I'm so glad that he's going to be stewarding these funds. So he's being very cautious, and he's waiting until this approval comes through. It was supposed to come through, unfortunately, in May. It hasn't yet. So I'm being very hesitant to communicate a new date to the public, lest I have to revise my estimate again. But we said June, and I want to give people some ample time to prepare themselves. So, realistically, late June at this point is probably the most realistic time frame, though no guarantees yet, because I really want to have the foundation on board and with the approval in its hands before we go out and communicate a date and get ready.
And this is, you said Switzerland, so that's pretty interesting. It's not based in the US, not based in London. You're going to have a Swiss registration on this entire foundation?
Yeah, so basically, the way it works is essentially Johan set up a nonprofit in Switzerland to promote the use of the Tezos protocol, and they'll be the ones managing the initial issuance of tokens and the business development activities afterwards with the donations to the foundation.
And I understand you're right now running through Europe, and I know we have very few minutes left. So are you doing a road show? Is that what's the intent for traveling to Europe right now?
Yeah, so I actually came over. To see my in-laws in France. This trip was scheduled for a really long time, and then I got an invitation to speak at Founders Forum. They have a small. They have a small conference for women specifically, and I was super happy that they invited me over. So I'm going to London this afternoon to speak at that. And I also know some folks in Greece that I wanted to see. So yeah, I guess it's more of a networking trip than anything else. But I needed to see my family for this particular event, so it was mostly anchored on that. But I inevitably find a dozen excuses to stay every time I go to Europe.
I don't blame you. Well, listen, it was really nice having you. I hope your zigzag across Europe is as successful as you have it in your mind. And hopefully lots of luck on that launch. And don't worry about the negative on the internet. I think you're doing a good thing.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And thanks for having me.
Thank you. Take care, Kathleen.
Bye-bye.